The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Colorado County Courthouse, catching on the polished wood of the benches and the cold brass of the fixtures. It was a day that would have seemed ordinary to most, but inside Courtroom 4B, tension clung to the air like a thick fog. Reporters murmured into microphones, attorneys whispered urgently to one another, and the gallery, filled with spectators, shifted uneasily. The day's case was already unusual. A kidnapping trial involving a 3-year-old witness named Ellie, but no one had anticipated the twist that was about to unfold. Ellie's mother, Sarah, gripped her daughter's tiny hand with a mix of pride and fear. The little girl clutched a worn, stuffed rabbit to her chest, its fur faded and threadbare from nights of comfort and terror. 3 years old. Small, fragile, almost too young to grasp the gravity of what was about to happen. And yet somehow, she had seen more than anyone else in that room could imagine. She had lived through a nightmare that adults would struggle to describe, let alone remember with clarity. Officer Daniels, a seasoned K-9 handler with more than a decade of experience, sat near the witness stand with Rex, his loyal German shepherd. Rex's coat gleamed under the courtroom lights, his muscles taut, his senses alert. He was not just a dog, he was a detective, a protector, and an extension of Daniel's instincts. The courtroom staff had reluctantly agreed to his presence, believing the dog might provide comfort to Ellie, but few anticipated the impact he would have. The child's arrival was quiet but commanding. Sarah held her close, guiding her toward the witness stand, while Ellie's eyes darted nervously across the room. Spectators leaned forward, cameras clicking. She was too young to understand decorum, too small to comprehend the protocols of the court. And yet, something in her gaze suggested a depth far beyond her years. She scanned the rows of strangers, then paused. Her eyes locked onto Rex. For a moment, it was as if time itself had stilled. The whispers in the courtroom fell silent. The judge, a woman known for her patience and calm demeanor, raised an eyebrow, sensing that something extraordinary was about to occur. Ellie's tiny hand lifted slowly, pointing with unshakable certainty at the K-9 sitting beside Officer Daniels. The moment was so unexpected, so unlike any courtroom procedure anyone had witnessed, that murmurs erupted across the room. Reporters jotted notes frantically. Attorneys exchanged bewildered glances. No one could interpret the meaning of a 3-year-old pointing at a dog, and yet the weight of the gesture pressed heavily in the silence. Daniels leaned closer, speaking softly to Rex, whose ears perked instantly. The dog's instincts, honed over years of detecting danger and tracking trauma, flared. He recognized something in the child, a scent, an emotion, a memory that resonated deeply with his training. In that instant, Rex was no longer merely a presence in the room. He became a bridge between a frightened child and the truth she had yet to articulate. Ellie hesitated, then, as if encouraged by the dog's attentive stance, took a step closer. Her small voice trembled as she whispered words that were barely audible, yet carried a gravity that made the room hold its collective breath. Daniels leaned in, listening intently. "That's it, Rex," he murmured, his tone low and steady, guiding the dog without alarming the courtroom. Rex responded, stiffening, muscles taut, eyes fixed. It was the alert, a behavior that only the most highly trained K-9 would display when detecting a direct link to trauma or danger. The courtroom seemed to shrink around them. All eyes turned to the child and the dog, sensing that something significant was transpiring beyond their understanding. Even the judge paused mid-sentence, the gavel hovering, as if to mark the moment as sacred and fragile. Ellie's gaze shifted to the defendant seated at the table. His hands twitched nervously, and a faint sheen of sweat appeared across his brow. He was attempting to maintain composure, but the intensity of the moment was unraveling the carefully constructed facade he had relied upon. The defense attorney leaned in, whispering urgently, but Ellie ignored the adults entirely. Her attention was singular, focused, unrelenting. Then in the softest voice imaginable, she spoke again. 2 words, barely more than a breath, but sufficient to trigger an unmistakable reaction from Rex. His tail stiffened, his body coiled like a spring, eyes blazing with recognition. Officer Daniel's heart raced. He had never seen the dog react with such certainty unless it was linked to a confirmed threat. The signal was clear. The child was pointing to the very person responsible for her trauma. Gasps echoed across the room. Reporters froze mid-note, attorneys blinked in disbelief, and spectators leaned forward, unsure if their eyes were deceiving them. A 3-year-old had just, in her own quiet and profound way, identified a link that professionals had missed. It was almost supernatural, the precision of her awareness combined with the dog's training. Sarah reached forward instinctively, brushing her daughter's hair back, whispering, "It's okay, baby. You're safe." But Ellie barely registered her mother's presence. Her focus remained on Rex and the man across the table. It was as if she were calling upon the dog as a witness, a protector, a conduit for the truth that had remained buried in silence. The judge, sensing the courtroom's tension, raised her gavel. "We will proceed," she said calmly, but her voice betrayed the flicker of amazement she felt. The defense attorney objected, questioning the admissibility of the child's interaction with a dog, but the prosecutor interjected with quiet authority. The interaction had relevance. The dog's behavior was not mere coincidence. It was, by all professional accounts, evidence of recognition, an instinctive, trained, undeniable response. Ellie's hands trembled slightly as she knelt before Rex. Her eyes filled with tears, but not of fear alone, of relief, of recognition, of trust in the one being who had protected her before. The courtroom, now silent as a held breath, watched as the scene unfolded. In that moment, age, size, and experience were irrelevant. The child and the dog communicated a truth that transcended words, a story of terror, survival, and instinctive justice. Rex's reaction grew more pronounced. He shifted his weight, pawing slightly, nudging Daniels toward the defendant. The signal was unmistakable. Daniels' experienced eyes caught every nuance, the stiffened legs, the fixed gaze, the subtle growl in the throat, all signs that the dog recognized danger directly associated with the person the child had unconsciously identified. Whispers began to ripple through the courtroom once more, now mixed with awe and apprehension. The spectators sensed they were witnessing something extraordinary. Not just a trial, not just a rescue, but a rare alignment of courage, innocence, and trained instinct converging in a single, powerful moment. Ellie, sensing the weight of the room, straightened slightly. Her tiny voice, though barely above a whisper, carried a clarity that froze the courtroom in place. She spoke again, pointing firmly at Rex, then at the man who had been on trial for weeks. Every eye tracked the motion, every mind strained to interpret the meaning. And then it hit them all at once. The child, the dog, the silent signals. They had uncovered a piece of truth no one else had yet dared to articulate. The judge leaned forward, studying the girl with a mixture of wonder and solemnity. This was no ordinary testimony. This was a moment where the boundaries of conventional evidence blurred with instinct, memory, and survival. She allowed the interaction to continue, fully aware that this tiny human and her canine companion were about to shift the course of the trial. Outside the courtroom, the world would never know the quiet intensity of the hours leading up to this moment. But inside, every heartbeat, every whisper, every glance held the tension of revelation. Ellie's small frame, trembling yet determined, her stuffed rabbit clutched like armor, stood as a testament to resilience. And Rex, every muscle taut, every sense on edge, embodied the trained instinct of justice waiting to be delivered. As Part 1 draws to a close, the courtroom remains frozen in collective awe. The whispers have quieted. The gavel rests, unstruck. Spectators, lawyers, officers, and the judge themselves cannot take their eyes off the improbable duo at the center of the room. A 3-year-old girl and a German shepherd have, in a matter of moments, shifted the entire atmosphere from routine procedure to a palpable tension, a heartbeat away from revelation. Outside, the sun continues to rise, casting light into the courthouse, illuminating the scene as if nature itself were acknowledging the extraordinary events unfolding within. Inside, the story is only beginning, and yet, For those present, it already feels like a turning point. The moment when courage, innocence, and trained instinct converge to speak a truth louder than any courtroom debate ever could. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Every person present felt it, the eerie weight of expectation and the quiet certainty that something extraordinary was about to unfold. Ellie knelt closer to Rex, her tiny fingers barely brushing the fur on his neck. The dog's eyes locked with hers, pupils sharp, muscles taut, his entire body resonating with a signal only Officer Daniels fully understood. This was not play, not coincidence. Rex had detected a scent, an emotional imprint that linked the child to a human source of fear. The room had gone silent, yet in that silence the air vibrated with suspense. Ellie's lips quivered as she whispered something, a phrase so soft that only Rex and Daniels could perceive it. Even Sarah, her mother, strained to hear, but the words dissolved like fragile mist. Rex stiffened, his tail raised, his stance solid and unwavering. Daniels felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, the kind that came when his partner detected imminent danger. This alert wasn't routine. It was the recognition of a human threat, tied directly to the trauma Ellie had endured. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing, sensing the courtroom was no longer ordinary. Reporters froze mid-typing, their cameras trained on the child and the dog, unsure what story they were capturing. Attorneys whispered behind hands, debating what to do, whether the child's interaction with the K-9 could be considered evidence. Spectators shifted, a wave of collective curiosity spreading through the room. A child, a dog, and a silent signal had drawn the attention of everyone present. The anticipation was palpable, like the moment before a storm breaks. Daniels whispered softly, his voice barely audible. "It's okay, Rex, that's it, good boy." The dog responded immediately, eyes blazing with recognition, tail stiff, body coiled. He wasn't guessing. Every trained muscle in his body signaled certainty, a canine declaration that the child's fear had a specific source, a real and present human link. The man at the defense table squirmed under the weight of Rex's gaze. Sweat formed at his temple and he shifted uneasily in his chair. He could not meet the eyes of the child or the dog. Ellie's tiny hand trembled, but her gaze never wavered. She pointed deliberately, first at Rex, then at the man whose composure was cracking with every passing second. It was as if she were drawing a line between her experience and the object of her fear, and Rex recognized the connection instinctively. The courtroom, sensing the tension, went still again. No one dared breathe, and yet every heartbeat echoed loudly in the shared awareness of the impossible scene. Sarah knelt beside her daughter, whispering reassurances, but Ellie barely acknowledged her mother. She was focused entirely on Rex and the man she had never dared to speak about before. The dog's behavior grew more pronounced. His ears rose sharply, his tail stiffened further, and a low growl resonated from his chest, controlled, precise, deliberate. Only Daniels understood the meaning. Rex was identifying the person tied to Ellie's trauma. The courtroom's collective uncertainty deepened. This was no ordinary reaction. Ellie's voice, soft but unwavering, broke the silence again. She whispered the words that would change the entire trial, words the courtroom could not yet hear but that Daniels understood completely. Rex responded instantly, his alert level intensifying. Every motion, every muscle, every subtle shift of his stance screamed recognition. He was identifying a human linked to fear, linked to harm, linked to Ellie's experience. The child's trauma, her memory, and the dog's trained instinct converged in a single, unspoken communication that stunned the room. The man at the defense table froze. He had counted on the trial proceeding in predictable fashion, on witnesses providing routine, unthreatening testimony. He had never anticipated a 3-year-old girl and a German shepherd conspiring, unintentionally, unknowingly, to undermine his carefully constructed facade. He shifted in his chair, hands shaking slightly. The defense attorney whispered urgently, trying to intervene, but the moment had already passed intervention. The child and the dog were speaking a language the courtroom had never witnessed before. Ellie pointed again, her small hand unwavering. Her gaze met the dog's eyes, and in that instant it was clear. She trusted Rex implicitly. The bond between them was unspoken but unbreakable. She had survived a nightmare the night of her abduction, and Rex had been part of the rescue she barely remembered. Now she was leaning on that memory, guiding the dog to identify the true source of her fear. The courtroom was captivated, hanging on every small gesture, every subtle movement. Daniels adjusted the leash slightly, careful not to disturb Rex's focus. "Good boy," he murmured again, his voice calm but taut with excitement. The dog's response was instantaneous. He shifted forward, body rigid, eyes locked on the man who had underestimated the scene's significance. The prosecutor, observing silently, leaned forward, realizing that the child and the K9 had just created a turning point in the trial. A 3-year-old's instinctive trust in a trained dog was about to expose hidden truths. The judge, sensing the extraordinary moment, allowed the interaction to continue. She was experienced, having presided over numerous cases, but this was unprecedented. She watched the child, the dog, and the man in tandem, recognizing the profound significance of what was unfolding. The whispers, gasps, and occasional camera flashes ceased. Everyone in the room knew they were witnessing something that transcended ordinary evidence. A child's trauma, a dog's training, and a criminal's hidden guilt were colliding in a moment of pure revelation. Ellie's lips moved again. She whispered a phrase that seemed to hang in the air, delicate yet powerful. Daniels nodded slightly, reading the cues, and Rex responded with absolute certainty. The dog's gaze did not waver, his body did not relax, and the low, deliberate growl continued. It was a canine declaration. The child's fear was real, and it was linked to the man in front of them. The courtroom could feel the tension tighten, as though the air itself were drawn taut. Spectators leaned forward, holding their breath. Reporters typed furiously, realizing they were capturing something extraordinary. Attorneys whispered urgently, trying to process what they were witnessing. The man at the defense table had grown pale, beads of sweat forming as he tried, and failed, to meet the child's gaze. The courtroom had transformed from a routine legal proceeding into a theater of suspense and revelation. Every person present recognized that a single, quiet interaction was shifting the entire trial's trajectory. Sarah whispered reassurances to Ellie, her voice trembling slightly. The child barely responded, focused entirely on Rex. It was clear she trusted the dog more than any adult in the room. This was not simple obedience. This was instinct, recognition, and survival merging in a single, fragile form. The child's trauma and the K9's trained instincts created a language the courtroom was just beginning to understand. Every movement, every glance, every gesture had meaning. Then came the final, subtle motion. Ellie extended her small hand directly toward the man at the defense table, pointing with a clarity that silenced the room completely. Rex responded immediately, muscles tightening, eyes blazing. Daniel's heart raced. He knew exactly what the dog was signaling. This was a confirmed recognition of the source of the child's trauma. The courtroom felt the tension spike, as though electricity had surged through the air. The judge leaned forward, whispering to herself. She had presided over cases involving young witnesses before, but never had a courtroom seen a child and a dog convey such critical information without words. Gasps ran through the spectators. The man at the defense table's composure shattered. His lawyer whispered frantically, but the moment was beyond legal manipulation. The truth was being revealed in a silent, instinctive manner, and nothing could alter it. Ellie's gaze never wavered. She looked from Rex to the man and back, tiny fingers pointing with unwavering certainty. The courtroom had reached a crescendo of tension. Everyone present understood this was not coincidence, not suggestion. It was recognition. It was memory. It was justice, articulated in the language of survival and instinct. As Part 2 comes to a close, the courtroom remained frozen in awe. The whispers and murmurs had vanished. Spectators, attorneys, reporters, and the judge were riveted. A 3-year-old girl, a German shepherd, and a sequence of quiet, instinctive signals had transformed a routine trial into a theater of revelation. Everyone present understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. A child and a K-9 revealing truths that words alone could not convey. The stage was set for the shocking revelations that would follow, and the entire courtroom felt it. The moment of truth was approaching, and nothing would ever be the same. The courtroom was utterly silent. Every eye was fixed on Ellie, the tiny girl who had somehow transformed a standard trial into a living tableau of suspense. She clutched her stuffed rabbit tightly, her knuckles white against the worn fabric. Her gaze, unwavering, remained locked on Rex. Officer Daniels knelt beside his partner, whispering softly, guiding the dog's attention without breaking the fragile connection between child and canine. Every subtle movement of Rex was deliberate. Every shift, every muscle twitch told Daniels exactly what was happening, and he knew it was far more than anyone else could comprehend. Ellie took a shaky breath and glanced at her mother, Sarah, who leaned closer, urging calmness, whispering words of reassurance. But Ellie barely registered her mother's presence. Her mind was elsewhere, tracing the edges of memory, trying to articulate something she had buried deep within herself. The room seemed to shrink around her, the murmurs of reporters and whispers of lawyers fading into a distant hum. All that existed was her fear, her memory, and the dog beside her who had already sensed the truth. Then, in a voice so small that most of the courtroom couldn't hear, she spoke. He was there. The words were simple, but the courtroom felt the impact as if a physical force had swept across the benches. Officer Daniels' heart skipped a beat. Rex stiffened further, locking onto the man at the defense table with a precision that only came from deep recognition. This wasn't mere coincidence. It wasn't a guess. The dog was identifying someone associated with Ellie's trauma, and the child had just confirmed it with the smallest whisper. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Reporters froze mid-note, scribbling furiously, unsure whether to trust their senses. Attorneys leaned in to see more clearly, sensing the gravity of the moment. Even the judge, a woman known for her composure, felt her pulse quicken. This was unprecedented. A child, barely able to form full sentences, had now aligned with the instincts of a highly trained K-9 to point out a truth that adults had struggled to uncover. The man at the defense table went pale. His confident demeanor faltered. For weeks, he had relied on the courtroom's routines, the assumptions that a child this young could offer no credible testimony. Now, under the gaze of the room and under the unwavering attention of Rex, his facade was crumbling. He shifted nervously, trying to look composed, but every subtle sign betrayed his anxiety: trembling fingers, shifting weight, fleeting eye contact avoided. Ellie continued, slowly articulating the fragments of memory that had haunted her. "He came back," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I saw him that night. Rex chased him away." Her words were soft, but Daniel's trained ear and the dog's reaction confirmed their truth. Rex's tail stiffened, a low, deliberate growl vibrating in his chest, a sound that conveyed absolute certainty. The K-9 had been part of Ellie's rescue that night, and the memory of the trauma, long dormant, now revealed itself through instinct and whisper. The courtroom murmurs grew louder as the implications became clear. The man being tried was linked directly to the child's fear, and perhaps more shockingly, Ellie was indicating that someone else, someone who had not yet been apprehended, had been involved. The prosecutors leaned in, urgency rising. Notes were scribbled in real time. Every observer understood that the case had shifted dramatically, all because a child and a dog had communicated what the adults could not. Sarah moved closer, tears prickling at her eyes. She whispered, "Ellie, it's okay. You're safe now." The child barely acknowledged her mother, her focus unwavering. For a moment she was not 3 years old, but a survivor, a witness, a guide to justice. The courtroom, filled with people who had spent years studying law and procedure, watched helplessly as instinct and memory spoke louder than any deposition, any cross-examination, or any exhibit. Officer Daniels stepped carefully, ensuring that Rex's attention remained fixed. "Good boy," he murmured. Every movement of the dog was deliberate, controlled, and deliberate again. The K-9's body was a language all its own, signaling recognition, danger, and confirmation in ways that words could not match. The man at the defense table shifted uncomfortably. He had no defense against a child's memory combined with a K-9's trained instinct. Every eye in the room watched, riveted, as the courtroom's tension spiraled toward an inevitable revelation. Ellie's small hand trembled as she pointed again, not at Rex this time, but at the man. Her words were barely audible. He did it. The courtroom collectively held its breath. Every person present understood viscerally that these were not the utterances of a child repeating phrases. This was the articulation of memory finally given voice, reinforced by instinct. The dog growled softly, his gaze fixed, muscles taut, a living conduit confirming Ellie's fragmented recollection. The defense attorney leaned in, whispering urgently, but the child's attention was unshakable. Even the prosecutor paused, realizing that Ellie's testimony, though unconventional, was invaluable. This tiny witness, guided by a K-9 who had been part of her rescue, was revealing details that would have otherwise remained hidden, perhaps forever. The courtroom was no longer a space of routine law. It was a theater of revelation, and every participant felt the extraordinary weight of the unfolding events. Rex nudged Daniels gently, indicating a readiness to advance toward the defendant. Daniels adjusted the leash, careful not to interfere, allowing the dog to communicate. The prosecutor leaned forward. "Your Honor," she said softly, "we may have confirmation from both the witness and the K-9 regarding the defendant's direct involvement." The judge's eyes widened slightly, her composure momentarily challenged by the gravity of the statement. Ellie continued to speak in fragments, her words hesitant but clear. "He scared me. I ran. Rex saved me." Every word seemed to hang in the air, heavy with truth. The courtroom felt as if it were suspended in a delicate balance between disbelief and awe. No one had ever witnessed such a synchronized display of recognition between a child and a K-9, and the implications were staggering. The man at the defense table grew increasingly pale, sweat forming at his brow. His hands shook subtly, betraying the calm he desperately tried to maintain. For weeks, he had relied on the assumption that a 3-year-old could offer little in terms of concrete evidence. Now, confronted with the child's memory and the K-9's unwavering response, that assumption had been completely dismantled. Rex's growl deepened, a low rumble that reverberated through the room. It was controlled, precise, and deliberate, a canine articulation of certainty. Officer Daniels' voice was steady, yet taut with emotion. "Rex recognizes this person," he explained quietly. "This is the individual linked to the trauma Ellie experienced. There is no mistake." The words seemed to hang in the air, and the courtroom remained silent, absorbing the weight of the revelation. Ellie's mother, Sarah, wiped a tear from her eye. She had feared that her daughter's trauma would render her incapable of providing clarity, but now she saw that Ellie's memory, combined with the dog's instinct, was uncovering truths adults had struggled to see. The little girl's bravery, her instinctive trust in Rex, had transformed the trial into something far beyond ordinary legal procedure. The gallery held its collective breath as the judge allowed the moment to continue. Ellie knelt, pointing deliberately at the man. "Rex, he did it," she whispered. The dog's alert intensified, a clear and undeniable confirmation of the child's statement. Every attorney, every officer, every spectator realized they were witnessing a rare alignment of trauma, memory, and trained instinct. This was no ordinary courtroom exchange. This was the unveiling of truth through extraordinary means. The defendant's composure shattered. He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding both the child and the dog. The courtroom murmurs rose, a mixture of disbelief and fascination. This was not a typical moment of testimony. It was a revelation. A child's trauma, unspoken for months, had found its voice through instinct, guidance, and the unwavering presence of a K-9 trained to detect danger. Daniels adjusted Rex's stance carefully, ensuring the dog remained focused. The prosecutor whispered quietly to the judge, explaining that the K-9's reaction was consistent with professional training for detecting trauma-associated scent and recognition. The courtroom listened, rapt, as the implications sank in. A 3-year-old had just, through instinct and guidance, pointed the way toward a truth that had eluded investigators and adults alike. As Part 3 draws to a close, the courtroom was frozen in awe. The whispers, the gasps, the stifled murmurs, all had ceased. Every person present recognized the extraordinary significance of the scene. A child, a dog, and the truth she had buried were now aligned in perfect clarity. The trial had shifted irreversibly. What had begun as a routine court proceeding had become a moment of revelation, and the participants understood it. This was just the beginning of uncovering the full story. Outside the courthouse, the morning sun continued to rise, casting light into the building, illuminating the faces of those present. Inside, the courtroom remained suspended in tension, waiting for the next revelation. The moment was fragile yet powerful. Ellie's memory, once silent, had found a voice through the loyalty and instinct of a K9 who had been with her from the night of her rescue. The stage was set for the truth to continue unraveling, piece by piece, in the coming moments. The courtroom air hung heavy with tension, each breath seeming to echo unnaturally in the hushed room. Ellie clutched her stuffed rabbit to her chest as her small fingers pointed unerringly at the man seated at the defense table. Officer Daniels kept a firm hand on Rex's leash, aware that any sudden movement could break the fragile but crucial connection between child and dog. Every muscle in Rex's body was taut, his gaze fixed, every instinct alert. This was no ordinary courtroom drama. It was a live demonstration of instinct, memory, and truth converging in real time. The defense attorney leaned toward the man, whispering frantically, but his words fell on deaf ears. The defendant's eyes darted nervously from the child to the dog and back again, his face pale, sweat glistening across his forehead. The composed man he had tried to project in previous sessions had entirely vanished. His posture, once rigid with confidence, now suggested someone cornered and unprepared to face the unexpected. The room seemed to hold its collective breath, as the implications settled like a weight pressing on everyone present. Ellie's gaze remained steady, unwavering, as though guided by some inner compass. She pointed at Rex, then at the man, her tiny voice trembling yet firm. "He did it," she whispered. The words were simple, almost fragile, but the K9's reaction amplified their power. Rex growled low in his throat, the sound deliberate and controlled, a canine signal of recognition. Every person in the courtroom immediately understood that this was not random behavior. Rex was confirming the child's identification with unshakable certainty. Officer Daniels kept his voice calm, though his pulse raced. "Rex recognizes the individual connected to Ellie's trauma," he explained quietly to the judge. "This is the person linked to the events the child experienced. The dog's response is consistent with trained detection of trauma-related scent recognition. There is no error." The courtroom remained still, absorbing the enormity of the statement. It was not just a child's memory, it was corroborated by the instincts of a highly trained K9. Spectators shifted uneasily in their seats, some leaning forward to see more clearly, others whispering under their breath. The reporters, realizing the magnitude of the scene, began furiously scribbling, their notes capturing the moment for posterity. The courtroom had transformed from a routine trial into a stage where innocence, instinct, and truth intersected in a way no one could ignore. Every eye followed Ellie and Rex, aware that the proceedings had entered uncharted territory. The defendant's composure began to crack visibly. He tried to speak, attempting to muster an explanation, but his voice faltered. The words he had rehearsed over weeks of preparation dissolved under the weight of the child's testimony and the K9's behavior. The defense attorney frantically gestured, whispering instructions that were drowned out by the palpable tension in the room. The judge, sensing the moment's gravity, raised her gavel but did not strike, letting the scene unfold organically. Ellie stepped back slightly, still pointing, her lips quivering as fragments of memory began surfacing. "Rex chased him," she said, voice small but certain. "The man bad." Each word was punctuated by the dog's alert, tail stiff, growl low, eyes unwavering. Officer Daniels' hand tightened on the leash, aware that Rex's instincts were guiding them toward a revelation more significant than anyone in the courtroom had anticipated. This was not mere identification. It was confirmation that the investigation had overlooked critical details. The prosecution team leaned forward, their expressions a mix of disbelief and urgency. They had suspected the possibility of undiscovered elements, but this was beyond anything they had envisioned. A 3-year-old's memory, previously dismissed as fragmented and unreliable, combined with a K-9's trained instincts, had created an undeniable link between a human suspect and the child's trauma. This was evidence of an entirely new dimension of truth, a revelation that could alter the course of the trial dramatically. Sarah, Ellie's mother, tried to maintain her composure but felt her heart racing. She had feared that the child's memory would remain buried, inaccessible in the chaos of adult procedures and legal barriers. Yet here it was, emerging vividly through instinct and trust. Ellie's bravery, her willingness to speak in fragments despite fear, and her connection to Rex had created a conduit for truth that no adult could fabricate. The mother's eyes glistened as she realized her daughter was not just a witness. She was a key participant in uncovering hidden facts. The defendant shifted again, hands trembling, attempting to look composed. It was a futile effort. The courtroom could sense his anxiety, amplified by Rex's unwavering attention. Every observer understood that the child and the dog had already identified the real source of the trauma. The man's facade had been shattered, revealing panic and fear that words alone could not conceal. The courtroom's atmosphere grew increasingly tense, a pressure that seemed almost tangible, pressing against walls and benches alike. Daniels adjusted Rex slightly, ensuring the dog's focus remained sharp. "He's certain," Daniels murmured. "Rex wouldn't behave like this if there were any doubt. He recognizes the person responsible." The judge nodded, absorbing the information with careful consideration. The courtroom had become a theater of revelation. Everyone present understood they were witnessing a convergence of courage, instinct, and truth, a combination so rare it defied precedent. Ellie continued speaking in fragments, her small voice trembling yet resolute. "The man, he came back, scared me," each word punctuated by Rex's physical cues. The stiffened body, the unrelenting gaze, the controlled growl, created a pattern no one could ignore. This was beyond ordinary testimony. It was a living demonstration of truth being revealed through the alliance of human memory and canine instinct. Every heartbeat in the room echoed the tension, and every eye remained glued to the duo at the center. The defense attorney attempted to interject, offering legal objections, but the judge allowed the interaction to continue. She understood that this was no ordinary testimony, no routine display. This was evidence emerging in a raw, instinctive form. The child's memory, previously inaccessible, was now articulated through both her words and Rex's behavior. The courtroom held its collective breath, realizing that the trial had reached an extraordinary turning point. The prosecutors, seizing the opportunity, leaned forward, whispering quietly among themselves. They recognized the implications. The current trial might be proceeding against the wrong individual entirely. The child and the K-9 were pointing to a truth that had been overlooked, revealing an error in assumptions that could change the legal trajectory completely. The courtroom's tension rose, each second loaded with suspense as the scene unfolded with deliberate precision. Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she brushed a stray lock of hair from Ellie's face. She whispered softly, "You're safe, honey. You're safe now." Ellie barely responded, absorbed entirely in guiding Rex. The trust she placed in the dog was profound, a connection built on shared experience, fear, and the survival instinct. The courtroom, filled with adults trained in law and procedure, recognized that this small child held more insight into the events than anyone else present. Rex moved subtly, a careful nudge forward, drawing Daniel's attention to the defendant. Every muscle in the dog's body signaled recognition, a confirmation that no human testimony had yet provided. The room seemed to vibrate with suspense, as though anticipating the next revelation. The audience could feel it. The case had shifted, the narrative had changed, and the courtroom's previous assumptions were being dismantled before their very eyes. Ellie's tiny voice rose slightly. "He did it, Rex knows." The words were simple, almost fragile, but the dog's reaction amplified their significance. The prosecutor's eyes widened. The defense attorney's face grew pale. The judge remained composed but attentive, aware of the unprecedented nature of the moment. The courtroom had become a nexus of memory, instinct, and justice, where a child's voice and a dog's training combined to reveal truths adults had struggled to discern. The defendant's face drained of color. He shifted, unable to meet either Ellie's gaze or Rex. His composure had vanished, replaced by a visible panic. The courtroom's tension mounted with every passing second, every subtle motion carrying weight. The audience leaned forward, captivated, as the child and the K-9 continued their silent but powerful collaboration, exposing the weaknesses in the narrative that had brought the defendant to trial. As Part 4 draws to a close, the courtroom remained in stunned silence. Whispers, gasps, and tentative murmurs had vanished. All eyes remained fixed on Ellie and Rex, aware that what was occurring transcended routine procedure. The child's memory, expressed through fragments and instinct, combined with the K-9's trained recognition, had revealed that the trial had been proceeding on incomplete or erroneous assumptions. The truth, once buried in fear and trauma, was now emerging, and the courtroom could sense that this revelation was only the beginning of uncovering the full story. Outside, the sun continued its climb, illuminating the courthouse in a steady, neutral light that contrasted sharply with the tension inside. But inside, time felt suspended. The child's trauma, the K-9's loyalty, and the courtroom's collective attention had aligned, creating a moment that none present would ever forget. The stage was set for the next revelation, and the anticipation was almost unbearable. What would be uncovered next? Now that the first layers of hidden truth had been exposed, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath, each second stretching into eternity. Ellie, small and fragile, clutched her worn stuffed rabbit tightly as her wide eyes tracked Rex. The dog's alert stance and unwavering gaze were impossible to ignore. Every subtle movement of Rex's body communicated the truth that everyone present felt but could not yet articulate. This was no ordinary courtroom drama. A child and a dog had become the living evidence, revealing hidden facts that adults had overlooked or misinterpreted. The tension in the room was suffocating, pressing against walls and benches alike. The man at the defense table grew increasingly pale, sweat forming at his brow, his hands trembling slightly. He had relied on the assumption that a 3-year-old could not provide credible testimony, that her fragmented memory would be dismissed, and that a dog's instincts could not be recognized as legitimate evidence. Now, his facade was crumbling, and the courtroom could see it. The carefully rehearsed story he had relied upon for weeks was disintegrating under the scrutiny of instinct and truth. Daniels remained calm, his hand firm on Rex's leash, yet inside his pulse raced. He knew that Rex's behavior was irrefutable. The K-9's training, combined with the child's memory, had revealed a connection that no adult testimony could replicate. This was recognition, identification, and instinct converging in a single, undeniable moment. The dog had sensed the source of the child's trauma, and Ellie had finally articulated it. Together, they were unraveling a lie that had been meticulously constructed. Ellie's voice was small but steady, her lips quivering as she whispered fragments of memory. "He scared me. I ran. Rex saved me." Each word punctuated by Rex's unwavering focus, stiff muscles, and low growl. It was as if the child and dog were speaking a language only they fully understood, a language of survival, memory, and truth. The courtroom audience felt the weight of it, their collective tension building as the realization sank in. The man on trial had been misidentified, and the real narrative was emerging through the eyes of a child and the instincts of a K-9. Sarah, Ellie's mother, fought to remain composed, though tears threatened to spill. Her daughter's bravery, her ability to articulate fragments of memory, and the trust she had placed in Rex had revealed facts no one else had uncovered. It was almost surreal. Legal experts, journalists, and spectators alike could not ignore the scene before them. The courtroom had transformed from a space of procedural routine into a theater of revelation, where instinct, memory, and courage converged in a spectacle of truth. The defense attorney whispered urgently, trying to regain control of the crumbling narrative. But the child's testimony, reinforced by Rex's trained recognition, was unshakable. Every attempt to redirect attention was met with the unrelenting force of instinct and memory. The audience could sense it. The lie that had been carefully constructed was collapsing in real time. Every movement, every glance, every whisper in the courtroom seemed to pulse with suspense, waiting for the next revelation to emerge. Ellie pointed again, her tiny finger trembling but precise, directing attention to Rex and then to the man at the defense table. "He did it," she said, her voice small yet carrying the weight of certainty. Rex growled low, a sound that resonated through the room, vibrating with undeniable confirmation. Officer Daniels' hand tightened slightly on the leash, ensuring that the dog remained steady and focused. The room seemed to shrink around them, every person present acutely aware of the extraordinary scene unfolding. The judge leaned forward, studying the child with an intensity usually reserved for complex legal arguments. "Proceed," she instructed softly, allowing the interaction to continue. The courtroom was no longer a traditional stage of legal procedure. It had become a stage for instinct, memory, and revelation. Spectators, attorneys, and law enforcement officers all held their breath, captivated by the rare alignment of circumstances before them. The child and the dog were dismantling assumptions and exposing truths that adults had struggled to uncover for weeks. Ellie continued to speak, fragments of memory emerging with increasing clarity. "The man and another, he wasn't alone, Rex chased him away." Her words were hesitant but unmistakable, every subtle cue from Rex, a shift in weight, a stiffening of muscles, a controlled growl, reinforced the truth of her statements. The courtroom could sense the stakes rising with each passing moment. The child was pointing not only to the man before them but also hinting at a hidden accomplice, someone still at large. The prosecution team leaned forward, urgency clear in their expressions. They whispered quietly among themselves, realizing that the case had taken an unexpected turn. The initial suspect, long considered the primary culprit, was no longer the full story. A lie had been shattered in front of everyone, exposed by the instincts of a dog and the courage of a 3-year-old girl. The courtroom held its collective breath, sensing that the unfolding revelations were far from complete. Daniels adjusted Rex's stance slightly, ensuring the dog remained focused. "He's certain," he murmured under his breath, referring to Rex. "There's no doubt in his recognition." The dog's alertness, reinforced by the child's guidance, had confirmed that the man seated at the defense table was directly involved in Ellie's trauma, and yet the fragments of memory indicated he was not acting alone. The courtroom could almost feel the invisible threads of truth weaving together before their eyes. Sarah reached for her daughter's hand, offering silent comfort. Ellie barely acknowledged her mother, fully immersed in the process of revealing the truth. Her bravery was astounding. She had faced a trauma that would paralyze most adults, and yet she was here, pointing, whispering, and guiding, a trained canine to uncover the reality of her experience. The courtroom, filled with adults trained in law and procedure, could only observe in awe as instinct, memory, and courage converged. The man at the defense table shifted uneasily, unable to meet the eyes of the child or Rex. His facade of confidence had entirely vanished. He whispered something to his attorney, words lost in the tension-filled air. The courtroom was captivated, realizing that a 3-year-old and a dog had dismantled weeks of legal strategy in minutes. The defendant's panic was palpable, a testament to the effectiveness of the child and K-9 partnership in exposing the truth. Ellie's small voice rose slightly, gaining courage. "He bad, Rex saved me." Each phrase was deliberate, her memory surfacing despite the trauma. Rex's response was immediate and unmistakable, reinforcing her identification of the man and suggesting the presence of another perpetrator. The courtroom's attention sharpened. Everyone understood the gravity of what was unfolding. This was not ordinary testimony. It was revelation in its most raw, instinctive form. The defense attorney attempted to object, citing procedural concerns, but the judge allowed the interaction to continue. She recognized that this was no ordinary testimony. The child's memory, combined with Rex's trained instincts, was uncovering a truth that had previously remained hidden. Spectators leaned forward, captivated, as the courtroom became a theater of revelation. Every subtle motion, every whispered fragment of memory, and every canine response carried weight beyond words. Daniels whispered again to Rex, ensuring the dog maintained focus. The alert signals continued, a living confirmation of Ellie's statements. The courtroom's atmosphere thickened with suspense, every person present aware that the case had shifted irreversibly. The initial narrative, constructed over weeks, had been upended. A lie had been exposed in front of everyone, dismantled by courage, memory, and trained instinct. Ellie's tiny hand trembled but remained steady as she pointed once more, guiding Rex's attention and reinforcing the truth of her statements. He, there, another. The fragments were unclear to those without knowledge of canine behavior, but every subtle shift in Rex's posture confirmed their accuracy. The courtroom was witnessing something extraordinary, a child and a K-9 revealing the hidden layers of a crime with precision and bravery that defied expectation. As Part 5 draws to a close, the courtroom remained suspended in awe and tension. The lie that had guided the initial stages of the trial had been shattered, exposed by the instincts of a dog and the courage of a 3-year-old. Spectators, attorneys, law enforcement officers, and the judge themselves understood that the revelations were only beginning. The initial suspect had been identified, but fragments of memory hinted at additional truths yet to emerge. The stage was set for the next revelation, and the courtroom awaited, collectively holding its breath, for the drama to continue. Outside, sunlight glinted through the courthouse windows, casting a neutral light that contrasted with the charged atmosphere inside. But within, the world had narrowed to a single point of focus: a child, a dog, and a truth that refused to remain hidden. The moment was fragile yet powerful, a turning point in the trial that no participant would ever forget. The unraveling of deception had begun, and the next steps promised revelations even more astonishing. The courtroom felt electrically charged, the air thick with anticipation as Ellie remained kneeling, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Every nerve in Officer Daniels' body was alert as he guided Rex, whose taut stance and unwavering gaze spoke volumes. The K-9's instincts were beyond doubt, and Ellie's small hands and determined eyes confirmed every subtle signal. The room, filled with spectators, attorneys, and law enforcement personnel, remained silent, collectively suspended in a tension that seemed almost unbearable. The narrative of the trial had shifted, and everyone present understood that the revelations were far from complete. Ellie's trembling voice broke the silence. "He, not alone," she whispered. The fragments of her memory had surfaced with startling clarity. She gestured toward Rex, then back at the man seated at the defense table, her tiny finger pointing with precision. The dog stiffened further, growling low but controlled, a sound that vibrated with undeniable certainty. The courtroom understood. There was more than one perpetrator, and Ellie was attempting to communicate this hidden truth through her words and Rex's instincts. Daniels leaned closer to the child, speaking in a calm, reassuring voice. "It's okay, Ellie. Rex knows. Show us." Rex responded instantly, shifting forward slightly, his focus fixed on the defendant. Every muscle in the dog's body radiated tension and awareness. It was a living display of recognition, a confirmation of the child's fragmented memory. The courtroom absorbed the moment in stunned silence, every observer aware that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The man at the defense table grew increasingly pale. His confident facade, carefully constructed over weeks of preparation, was crumbling in real time. He tried to whisper reassurances to his attorney, but his trembling hands and darting eyes betrayed his fear. The courtroom watched as the layers of deception began to peel away, revealing cracks that could no longer be concealed. The child and the K-9 had become the agents of truth, dismantling assumptions and exposing hidden realities with precision and clarity. Ellie's voice grew slightly stronger. "Another, he came night," she whispered, her words fragmented but powerful in meaning. Rex's low growl intensified, muscles coiling as if ready to act. Officer Daniels knew exactly what the dog was indicating. A second individual had been involved in the trauma Ellie had suffered. The revelation was staggering. The courtroom, long accustomed to procedural monotony, now found itself thrust into a narrative of suspense and discovery that no one could have predicted. Sarah, Ellie's mother, leaned forward, her hand gripping the pew in front of her. Her heart pounded as she realized the full extent of what her daughter was conveying. Ellie's bravery, coupled with Rex's trained instincts, was uncovering truths that no adult testimony had yet revealed. The child was speaking of events that had remained hidden in memory, guided only by instinct and courage. The courtroom collectively held its breath, understanding that the trial had entered a territory that was both unprecedented and profoundly compelling. The defense attorney attempted to object, citing procedural concerns, but the judge, fully aware of the extraordinary circumstances, allowed the interaction to continue. She recognized that the child's memory, reinforced by Rex's behavior, was revealing critical evidence that could not be ignored. The courtroom leaned in collectively, spectators craning their necks, journalists scribbling furiously, and attorneys exchanging whispers as the narrative unfolded with unprecedented tension. Ellie continued, her voice trembling yet resolute. "He hid place Rex smell." Her words, though fragmented, conveyed a chilling revelation. Rex reacted immediately, sniffing the air and shifting his focus, signaling recognition. Officer Daniels nodded slightly, understanding the cues. The child and the K-9 were working in tandem, articulating a truth hidden from investigators and the public alike. Every subtle movement, every whisper, every growl contributed to the unfolding story of trauma, instinct, and revelation. The defendant's composure collapsed further. He leaned back, staring blankly, realizing that the child and the K-9 had uncovered facts he had hoped would remain hidden. The courtroom watched, captivated, as the carefully constructed lie disintegrated under the combined weight of memory and instinct. Spectators whispered softly, the tension almost tangible, as the narrative's hidden layers began to emerge with clarity. Daniels adjusted Rex's stance slightly, ensuring the dog remained focused. "He recognizes the location," Daniels murmured under his breath, referring to the hidden site the child had alluded to. Rex's posture was rigid, eyes locked, tail stiff. The courtroom collectively felt the intensity of the moment. The narrative had shifted from accusation to revelation, exposing not only the primary perpetrator but hinting at complicity, concealment, and a location that had remained secret until this very moment. Ellie's tiny hands trembled as she pointed toward the defendant, then back to Rex, reinforcing the narrative of hidden complicity. "He hide, baby." Her words were chilling in their implication, suggesting that more victims, more secrets, and more truth lay hidden beyond the courtroom walls. Rex growled low, muscles coiled in recognition. Officer Daniels' pulse quickened. This revelation was larger than anyone had anticipated. The courtroom remained suspended, every person acutely aware that history was unfolding in real time. Sarah fought to maintain composure, squeezing her daughter's hand. Ellie's bravery and willingness to articulate fragments of trauma were extraordinary. Through her courage and the guidance of Rex, the child was revealing a narrative that adults had struggled to uncover. The courtroom, trained in law, procedure, and evidence, now witnessed instinct, memory, and courage combined to expose hidden truths in a manner that defied expectation. The prosecution leaned forward, urgency clear in their expressions. They whispered quietly, understanding that the trial had shifted irreversibly. The initial suspect, previously considered the primary perpetrator, was now only one piece of a larger, more complex story. The child's memory, combined with Rex's instinct, suggested additional actors and locations that had remained hidden. The courtroom absorbed the weight of this revelation, every observer acutely aware of its significance. Rex shifted subtly, signaling readiness to advance toward a new target. Daniels, maintaining a firm hand on the leash, allowed the dog to guide them. Every subtle cue from Rex conveyed certainty, recognition, and direction. The courtroom held its breath, understanding that the K9 was now pointing toward a concealed element of the case, a secret that had remained untouched for months. The tension was almost unbearable, each heartbeat echoing the suspense of discovery. Ellie's voice rose slightly. "He, not alone Rex, find," her words trailed, but their meaning was unmistakable. The K9's body language amplified the significance, creating a combined testimony that defied conventional understanding. The courtroom, spectators, and attorneys were captivated, realizing that a child and a trained dog were revealing critical details of a crime that adults had failed to uncover. The narrative had expanded, and the stakes had risen exponentially. The defendant's face drained of color, panic evident in every line of his expression. He whispered urgently to his attorney, seeking reassurance, but his words were drowned in the gravity of the moment. The courtroom understood that the child and the K9 had dismantled the narrative that had guided the trial up to this point. Lies had been exposed, secrets hinted at, and a hidden location revealed, all through instinct, courage, and memory. As Part 6 draws to a close, the courtroom remained in stunned silence. Every person present, from judge to spectator, understood that the trial had entered unprecedented territory. The initial assumptions had been shattered. A child's memory and a K9's instinct had uncovered a truth that adults had overlooked. Hidden locations, additional perpetrators, and fragments of trauma were now coming to light. The courtroom had become a theater of revelation, suspense, and discovery, and the anticipation of what would be revealed next was almost unbearable. Outside, sunlight continued to filter through the courthouse windows, highlighting the gravity of the moment. But within, time seemed suspended, as if the unfolding narrative had paused reality itself. A child, a dog, and the emerging truth had become the axis on which the entire courtroom now revolved. Every participant felt the tension, the awe, and the sense of witnessing history in the making. The revelations had begun, and the next steps promised to uncover truths even more astonishing than those already exposed. The atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted from tense anticipation to a palpable sense of urgency. Every eye was fixed on Ellie and Rex, the child and the K9 whose combined presence had transformed a routine trial into an unprecedented theater of revelation. Ellie knelt on the floor, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide but focused. Rex remained poised, tail stiff, ears raised, and body taut with anticipation. Officer Daniels kept a firm hand on the leash, aware that any sudden disruption could shatter the fragile connection that had revealed so much already. Ellie's voice trembled as she whispered, "He went there." She pointed subtly, the fragments of memory surfacing with painstaking clarity. Rex's response was immediate, a low, deliberate growl accompanied by a forward shift in stance. Every muscle in the dog's body screamed recognition and readiness. The courtroom felt the shift, the tension climbing, a collective understanding dawning on all present. They were not just witnessing testimony, they were witnessing a hunt, guided by instinct and memory, unfolding in real time. Daniels whispered softly to Rex, encouraging yet firm. "That's it, boy, focus." The dog responded instantly, eyes narrowing on the defendant, signaling identification not only of the man, but of a hidden location tied to Ellie's trauma. The courtroom remained eerily silent, each person holding their breath, sensing that the revelation was approaching its critical moment. The narrative had shifted completely. The initial trial was now a stage for discovery, suspense, and real-time investigation. The defendant shifted uncomfortably, sweat forming across his brow. His confidence had disintegrated, replaced by panic and disbelief. He tried to speak, his words faltering as he realized the child and the dog had identified both him and an unseen accomplice. His attorney whispered frantically, but the courtroom understood that legal tactics were powerless in the face of instinct and memory aligned so perfectly. Every observer felt the weight of truth pressing down, the suspense nearly unbearable. Ellie continued, fragments of her memory surfacing in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Rex, find, place, hide, each word was hesitant yet precise. The dog's growl deepened, signaling acknowledgement and recognition. Officer Daniels interpreted the cues silently, understanding that Rex was guiding them toward a location directly tied to Ellie's past trauma. The courtroom watched, captivated, as a child, and a dog effectively directed attention to a hidden truth, the gravity of which only they fully understood. Sarah, Ellie's mother, gripped the edge of the pew, her heart pounding. She whispered words of encouragement to her daughter, though Ellie hardly acknowledged her. The child's focus remained fixed on the dog, on the man at the defense table, and on the memories that were beginning to surface. Each whisper and subtle gesture guided Rex, whose trained instincts were translating fragments of trauma into actionable awareness. The courtroom collectively leaned forward, spellbound by the unfolding drama. The prosecution team exchanged hurried whispers, realizing the implications of what they were witnessing. The initial suspect, long thought to be solely responsible, was only one piece of a larger, more complex puzzle. The child's fragmented memory, reinforced by Rex's precise recognition, pointed to additional perpetrators, concealed locations, and evidence yet to be uncovered. The courtroom was now a dynamic stage for revelation, with suspense mounting by the second. Rex shifted slightly, moving forward under Daniel's careful guidance. The dog's alertness was almost palpable, a living instrument of discovery. The courtroom could sense the focus, the precision, and the intensity of the K9's instincts. Every subtle growl, every stiffened muscle, every narrowed gaze conveyed critical information that no adult witness could replicate. It was as if the room itself was suspended, waiting for the next revelation to emerge from the child-dog collaboration. Ellie whispered again, more urgently this time. Another he-night, scared. Her words were fragmented, but the meaning was clear. There was another person, a hidden element, a secret yet to be revealed. Rex responded instantly, body tense, eyes fixed, growling low but controlled. Officer Daniels understood immediately. The dog was confirming the child's memory and directing attention to the presence of another individual who had participated in the traumatic events. The courtroom felt the tension spike, the anticipation almost unbearable. The defense attorney leaned forward, attempting to object, but the judge raised a hand to silence him. She had already recognized the extraordinary circumstances. A child and a K9 were revealing details of the case that no adult testimony had uncovered. She allowed the interaction to continue, understanding that interrupting would risk losing the fragile yet critical alignment of memory and instinct. The courtroom leaned in, hanging on every subtle gesture, whisper, and growl. Ellie pointed again, small hands trembling yet deliberate. Hide, Rex knows. The K9's response was immediate and unmistakable. Every subtle shift in Rex's posture indicated recognition, confirmation, and readiness to reveal more. Officer Daniels adjusted the leash carefully, ensuring the dog remained focused without disturbing the natural flow of instinct-driven identification. The courtroom collectively absorbed the weight of the moment, realizing that the unfolding narrative was about to reach a dramatic crescendo. The defendant's face was pale, panic evident in every line. He whispered nervously to his attorney, who could do nothing to contain the collapse of their strategy. The courtroom understood. The child and K9 had identified the suspect and were pointing to additional hidden truths that had long remained obscured. The tension was almost tangible, pressing down on the benches, the walls, the judge, and every spectator present. Daniels whispered quietly to Rex, affirming his control and focus. The dog's response was subtle yet powerful, a forward lean, ears erect, eyes locked, growl low and controlled. It was a living translation of the child's memory into actionable awareness, a signal of recognition that could not be misinterpreted. The courtroom remained silent, collectively holding its breath, understanding that they were witnessing a hunt, guided by memory and instinct, unfolding in real time. Ellie's voice rose slightly. He place hide, another Rex find. Each fragment was precise, yet powerful in meaning. The courtroom sensed the stakes rising, the suspense almost unbearable. A child's memory and a K-9's trained instincts were revealing the full scope of the crime. Multiple actors, hidden locations, and secrets that had remained concealed for months. Every person present, from the judge to spectators, understood the significance of this extraordinary moment. Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand, whispering softly, though Ellie barely acknowledged her. The child's focus was absolute, guiding Rex with a precision and trust that only a survivor of trauma could manifest. The courtroom leaned forward collectively, captivated, spellbound by the collaboration of courage and instinct. Every subtle movement, every fragment of memory, every canine signal carried the weight of truth. Rex shifted subtly, alert to every cue from Ellie. Officer Daniels adjusted his stance, careful not to disturb the dog's focus. The courtroom remained silent, the tension coiling tighter with each passing second. Every observer understood that the trial had moved beyond conventional procedure. A child and a K-9 were revealing hidden truths that adults had failed to uncover, creating a suspenseful narrative that none would forget. Ellie pointed definitively, voice trembling but resolute. Another night. The meaning was unmistakable. The child was indicating another participant, a hidden perpetrator, and a secret location tied to her trauma. Rex's body language amplified the revelation, confirming the truth of her fragmented memory. The courtroom felt the gravity, the suspense, and the sense of witnessing history in real time. The defendant's panic deepened. He could not conceal his fear, the collapse of his story evident to everyone present. The courtroom's tension spiked, every heartbeat echoing the drama unfolding before them. Spectators whispered softly, journalists scribbled furiously, and attorneys exchanged urgent glances. The child and K-9 had transformed the courtroom into a theater of revelation, suspense, and action. As Part 7 draws to a close, the courtroom remained suspended in awe and tension. The child's fragmented memory, combined with Rex's instinct, had exposed hidden truths, additional actors, and secret locations. The initial narrative of the trial had been upended. Lies had been exposed, and the courtroom was now fully aware that the revelation was far from complete. The anticipation of what would be uncovered next was almost unbearable. Outside, sunlight filtered through the courthouse windows, illuminating the tense scene within. Inside, every participant felt the weight of history unfolding. A child, a dog, and the emerging truth had become the axis on which the courtroom now revolved. Suspense, courage, and instinct had converged, setting the stage for the final revelations that would change the course of the trial forever. The courtroom had reached a state of suspended chaos, every eye fixed on Ellie and Rex. The tiny girl knelt clutching her stuffed rabbit, the weight of her fear and courage intermingling in her wide, expressive eyes. Rex's body was tense, ears pricked, muscles coiled like springs, eyes unwavering. Officer Daniels maintained a careful grip on the leash, aware that the final revelation of truth was moments away. Every person present, lawyers, judge, spectators, reporters, felt the tension in the air as if it vibrated through the walls themselves. The drama unfolding was beyond anything any of them had witnessed. Ellie whispered again, her voice trembling yet determined. Another, hide basement. Her words, fragmented but precise, sent a wave of shock through the courtroom. Daniel stiffened, immediately understanding the significance. The child had not only confirmed the identity of the initial suspect but had revealed the location of a hidden site, a secret tied to her trauma, and likely evidence that no one had previously discovered. Rex growled low and controlled, his stance signaling recognition and readiness. The truth was about to surface fully. Sarah gripped the edge of the pew, her knuckles white. She whispered softly to her daughter, "You're safe, baby. You're doing so well." Ellie barely acknowledged her mother, her attention fixed entirely on guiding Rex toward the revelations locked in her memory. Every word, every gesture, every subtle signal from the dog communicated volumes. The courtroom remained silent, the anticipation almost unbearable. It was clear. They were about to witness the climax of an extraordinary collaboration between a child and a K-9. The defendant's confidence had entirely evaporated. Sweat dripped down his forehead, hands trembling as his once-rehearsed composure collapsed under the weight of instinct and truth. His attorney whispered urgently, but the courtroom understood that no legal argument could counteract the evidence emerging from the child-dog collaboration. Every subtle cue, Ellie's fragmented voice, Rex's taut posture, Daniel's careful guidance, was dismantling the carefully constructed facade of innocence. Ellie's tiny voice grew more determined. "Rex, find, crawl under," she pointed toward the floor, tracing invisible lines in the air with her small hand. Rex responded instantly, moving slightly under Daniel's guidance, his nose sniffing the air, body coiled with recognition. Every subtle shift in the dog's posture communicated that he had identified the hidden location referenced by the child. The courtroom leaned forward collectively, understanding the extraordinary significance. Evidence, secrets, and the full truth of the trauma were about to be revealed. Daniels whispered to Rex, encouraging but firm. "Good boy, steady." The dog responded, alert but controlled, every instinct focused on the clues provided by Ellie's memory. The courtroom remained silent, captivated, as this unusual alliance continued to function as a living instrument of revelation. It was not just memory. It was instinct, courage, and trust converging in real time. Every movement, every whisper, every low growl carried weight that no conventional testimony could match. The prosecution team exchanged urgent whispers, realizing the enormity of what was happening. The initial suspect, long assumed to be solely responsible, was only part of the story. Ellie's memory and Rex's instinct were revealing hidden evidence, the presence of additional actors, and the location of secrets that had eluded investigators for months. The courtroom collectively felt the suspense spike, every heartbeat sinking to the tension that crackled in the room. Ellie's small hand trembled as she pointed definitively at the defendant, then back to Rex. "Another, help, hide." Her words were fragmented, yet precise, confirming the presence of an accomplice and signaling the location of the hidden site. Rex responded immediately, muscles coiled, tail stiff, ears raised. Officer Daniels nodded subtly, understanding that the dog was ready to guide them to the final truth. The courtroom leaned forward, spellbound, aware that the climax of the case was unfolding in real time. The judge raised her eyebrows, her composure strained but present. "Proceed cautiously," she instructed, understanding the extraordinary circumstances. This was no ordinary testimony. A 3-year-old and a K-9 were revealing critical evidence, hidden locations, and additional participants in the crime. The courtroom collectively absorbed the significance, every observer understanding that this moment would be remembered as extraordinary in legal history. Ellie whispered again, voice quivering but determined. "Rex, crawl, look, box." Her fragmented words carried chilling precision. Daniels followed the cues carefully, moving slightly with Rex, the dog alert and ready. Every subtle growl, every stiff muscle, every narrowing of Rex's eyes communicated the presence of hidden evidence. The courtroom felt a collective shiver. The moment of revelation was imminent, and the suspense had reached a near unbearable peak. Sarah gripped her daughter's hand tightly. Tears spilled down her face as she whispered, "You're so brave, Ellie." Ellie barely acknowledged her, her attention fully consumed by guiding Rex and revealing the secrets that had long been buried. The courtroom leaned forward, captivated, aware that a hidden truth, undiscovered for months, was finally about to surface, thanks to the child's memory and the K-9's instincts. The defendant's face turned pale. Panic had replaced every last bit of confidence. He shifted nervously, avoiding both the child's gaze and the dog's unwavering stare. The courtroom sensed the collapse of his narrative. Lies that had guided the trial for weeks were being dismantled in front of everyone, by a child and a dog working in silent but perfect unison. Every observer felt the suspense tighten, waiting for the final act of revelation. Daniels whispered softly to Rex, "Steady, good boy." The dog's response was immediate. He leaned forward slightly, sniffing the air, body coiled, eyes narrowed. Every subtle cue communicated recognition, confirmation, and readiness. The courtroom collectively held its breath, every person aware that they were on the precipice of a revelation that would not only solve the case but also expose the hidden accomplice and the concealed location tied to the trauma Ellie had endured. Ellie pointed again, her voice rising slightly. Underfloor crawl. She traced an invisible line, guiding Rex's attention with precision. The dog responded instantly, nudging Daniels subtly, signaling readiness. The courtroom's anticipation reached a fever pitch. Every spectator, every reporter, every attorney understood that the child-dog partnership was about to uncover the final pieces of the puzzle that had eluded them for weeks. The prosecution leaned forward, urgency clear in their expressions. Whispered instructions and confirmation passed quickly, recognizing the gravity of the situation. The initial suspect was implicated, but the clues indicated another hidden participant. Evidence that had remained undiscovered was about to be revealed, and the courtroom collectively understood that the climax of this extraordinary trial was unfolding in real time. Ellie's voice, small but unwavering, whispered again, "Rex, box, open, keys." Her words, though fragmented, carried undeniable clarity. The K9's response was immediate, muscles coiled, eyes focused, tail stiff. Daniels nodded, understanding the final cue. The hidden evidence, the keys to the truth, were about to be uncovered. The courtroom leaned in, every observer spellbound, aware that they were witnessing history in the making. The defendant's panic intensified. His eyes darted nervously, realizing that not only had he been identified but that the evidence had been located, and an accomplice's presence hinted at. The courtroom felt the tension spike. The collapse of his carefully constructed story was now complete. Spectators whispered in awe, journalists scribbled furiously, and attorneys exchanged hurried glances. The child and dog had transformed the courtroom into a stage of revelation that none present would ever forget. Daniels guided Rex carefully toward the indicated spot. The dog sniffed, nudged, and coiled, signaling the presence of hidden items beneath the floorboards. Ellie's tiny hands trembled, pointing with precision. The courtroom was silent, holding its collective breath as the hidden truth was finally unveiled. A box containing evidence of the crimes, long concealed, and the unmistakable confirmation of an accomplice's involvement. Every observer felt the culmination of tension, courage, and instinct crystallize into reality. The judge leaned forward, her gavel unused but ready, eyes wide with disbelief. This is extraordinary," she murmured. The courtroom nodded collectively, each person recognizing that the child's bravery and the K9's instincts had revealed what no one else could. The evidence was indisputable, the accomplice implicated, and the truth fully revealed. The room seemed to vibrate with the energy of justice delivered in the most unexpected and astonishing way. As Part 8 draws to a close, the courtroom erupted into a controlled chaos of awe, shock, and relief. The child had survived trauma, her memory had guided a K9, and together they had uncovered the full truth. Hidden locations, accomplices, and evidence that had eluded investigators. The initial lies and assumptions were completely dismantled. The courtroom had witnessed an extraordinary collaboration between courage, instinct, and memory, culminating in a revelation that would be remembered for decades. Outside, the sunlight bathed the courthouse in a warm glow. Inside, a small girl and her K9 had changed the course of justice forever. The trial had begun as ordinary, but it ended as a testament to courage, trust, and the extraordinary power of instinct. Ellie clutched her rabbit. Rex sat alert yet calm, and Officer Daniels knew that they had just participated in something that defied the ordinary boundaries of law and human understanding. The truth had been unleashed, and justice finally was complete.